Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. I am so excited today to have Pramila Mullan, partner at IBM Consulting. Pramila, welcome.
Thank you.
So as we always start, would you mind maybe spending 5 minutes to talk about your journey into corporate venturing?
Yes, so my journey into corporate venturing took a unconventional path, actually. I actually come from a background in research and development, spending a number of years with Bell Labs during the 80s and 90s at Bell Laboratories doing research in distributed systems. Subsequently came out to the Bay Area to join a startup and spent a career navigating both the research environment along with the product development, product engineering, and product management environments as well for a number of companies, both small and large in the Bay Area. Subsequent to that, I joined Accenture Technology Labs actually in research, and was conducting research when the Accenture Ventures organization was formed. I joined Accenture Ventures as employee number 2 with Michael Redding, if you remember Michael Redding, for those of you who remember him. And that was the start of my journey in venturing, without really any background in that, not really knowing much, and came to my first global corporate venturing meeting looking to absorb with wide eyes and, trying to figure it all out.
Which year was it?
This was in 2015, and there were no beautiful books written at the time about the topic. It was
Corporate Venturing Insider podcast yet.
Exactly, absolutely, and no, none of the kinds of books that we have today to help us get started. It was really the early stages in some ways.
Very nice. And you are now at IBM.
I am now at IBM. I'm at IBM Consulting, and I head up the Ventures and Ecosystems organization within IBM Consulting, where we're focused on not just ventures for this, but also really, as we talk about the 3 knobs, right, of how to do innovation, which includes acquisitions, equity investing, and open innovation, and how to leverage all 3 arms collaboratively together. So I sit within an organization called Ventures, Ecosystems, and Acquisitions, actually, but I focus primarily on the Ventures and Ecosystems part of that.
Okay. And you haven't mentioned, but I think it's fairly obvious from your R&D background that you have an engineering background.
Absolutely, yes. I do have an engineering background. Academically, I have an engineering background, but in addition to that, I also did academically pursue an MBA. And, for those who are like deep into engineering, some would say, well, you can, there are a lot of different ways of learning different things. But for me, having that MBA exposure helped me a lot in the financial statement analysis and some of the gaps in the skill sets that I had as I transitioned into venturing. So I leaned back on that academic experience to help me figure certain things out, which I didn't have.
Very nice. So actually, let me ask an open question about the timing of an MBA. Yeah. Do you think it's good to have it before you even start the corporate venturing, or do you think it's actually quite nice to do it while still in the while getting started in corporate venturing?
Yeah. So I think, personally, I think it's never too early or never too late to get an MBA, and depending on an individual's career path, there are many different versions of an MBA that one can even have. They have the executive MBA programs for those who are, more mature in their careers. And then you have a standard MBA for those who are not. And also it depends on the individual. So there are some who will come into corporate venturing from a corp dev background. Well, they may not necessarily benefit a whole heck of a lot from the number rigor that one would get, because they've already got the numbers rigors. Mm-hmm. But then there are others who would benefit from that. And I think that, it's very important to understand your personal journey, understand your personal strengths and development opportunities, and then target your development opportunities through whatever means, whether it is a formal MBA, whether it is some certification that you do, whether it is there are many different ways of learning today that we embrace and absorb. As long as we have a good understanding of what our development opportunities are, then we can pursue those, right?
Very nice.
That's the most important thing to me.
Now, of course, IBM, Accenture, we're talking about very technical type of innovation, technology-based. How much of that background in R&D and engineering is a plus or potentially a bias?
I actually view it as a plus, and I'll tell you why. Whereas, and this gets back to the point that I was trying to make earlier, is recognizing one's individual strengths and development opportunities. Clearly, I had some development opportunities from a venturing perspective. Oh my gosh, I could list them. I think I've listed them in the past before as well. But one of the strengths that I brought to the table that is not easy to replicate was the depth and breadth of technology, from having worked in so many different areas and watched the evolution with a front row seat of technology over, frankly speaking, a couple of decades. From a deal flow perspective, from a meeting a startup, recognizing a startup, understanding what space they're in, and covering the breadth that an IBM Consulting has in terms of the different technology areas and the different industries that they cover, and having to do that across that breadth. I personally do not think I would have been able to do it as much what's the word I'm looking for? I would not have been able to do it as effectively had I not had that research experience. So I work from the gut a lot when I meet startups, when I look at startups, when I evaluate their technologies. And the time that I spent in R&D enables me to transcend the boundaries from looking at a fintech startup, for example, and comparing them to a AI ML or even a talent transformation type startup.
Very nice. And maybe I should ask, were you more on the research side or more on the product development side?
All of the above.
Okay. So then my question is going to be about the research part.
Yes.
In a way, research is about trying to discover what has not existed yet.
Yes.
And a startup is, most times, unless they are copycats, it's about going into a place which has not been proven.
Yes.
How much of the research discipline do you find as parallels with a startup?
Huge, actually, because what happens is, when you're working on research, you're not just working on research, you're working on research and you're trying to convince the world that your approach, whatever the topic may be, is absolutely right approach. And that involves first developing your own conviction, and then and researchers will never necessarily present themselves this way, but that's really what they're doing. They're forming their own conviction about a topic and then convincing the rest of the world that they are in fact right. And in many instances, there will be a number of naysayers along the world.
A few.
Just a tad bit, Nicolas, just a tad bit. But having that conviction and then being able to evangelize in the presence of naysayers is exactly what the CEO of a startup does from day one, right?
Yep.
As they go for their seed round, if they don't have their own conviction, they're not going to be able to convince someone to invest in that company or use their first product, or as you go along in the journey of the startup, every stage of the way. So there are huge parallels. I view this that way.
So one thing I always like to ask is about empathy to entrepreneurs. And now that you've described this in a way that I actually agree to, do you think you're getting more empathy for entrepreneurs from your research background or from the fact you worked for a startup?
I think I'm having a difficult time answering that question because, and I'll explain why. There's no one right answer here. We're trying to pigeonhole CEOs over here, and CEOs in startups are of all different kinds. Many of them come, some CEOs come from a strong sales background, right? Other CEOs are, stumble into the CEO role because they're first and foremost those researchers.
Yep. From
right?
the lab, PhD.
From the lab.
Yep.
Exactly. And so connecting with people always involves finding that common ground. And in finding that common ground with the startup, it entirely depends on what your common base is, and it could be because you work together in research. It could be because you were both working in a certain period of time in the past in the same space or the same technology area or the same company, even though you're with different parts or different functions of an organization. At the end of the day, it's people finding commonality and then going from there, right? So I'm having a difficult time.
No, but I love your answer. Let's move on something. So it's interesting. Very few people I've interviewed for the CVC Insider series talk about a product management background.
Yes.
That's one that I have. And so I have probably some bias towards that. But how helpful do you think the product management discipline helps you to be a very good investor?
Yes. So see, this is exactly what I was talking about, finding that commonality from some time in the past and then using. I learned something about you today, Nicolas, that I didn't know. I look forward to a number of conversations about that particular topic. So somewhat different from product engineering, product management requires what do product managers do, right? They're talking to a number of clients. They are working with their clients, and they're using those conversations in order to structure the today and future roadmap of the product that they're working on, the releases that they're working on. Now, those skills are hugely important in terms of having that conversation that you're with a startup that you're potentially looking to make an equity investment in, and understanding where that company is today and where the potential of that company is 5 years from now, right? And being able to roadmap that potential in order to be able to even assess whether to make an equity investment in that company. Now, we've been talking about equity investments over here a lot, but I want to go back to a topic that's near and dear to my heart.
Okay.
And that is this idea of multiple knobs when one is thinking about innovation, and leveraging all knobs to their fullest capacity. So it's not about equity investing only, especially from the perspective of a GSI, because from the perspective of a GSI, we're making an equity investment. Before the equity investment, we are a partner with the company. We don't have to invest in the company. And hey, guess what? After the equity investment is done, we're not just looking at the numbers and looking for the return on equity. In fact, it's about the fact that post-equity investment, they are a partner of ours. So it's business as usual to a certain extent on steroids.
On steroids,
right?
By the way, you mentioned GSI. I'm not sure everyone in the audience know what GSI is.
A global systems integrator. So IBM Consulting is a global systems integrator. They provide professional services to large enterprise clients, and they help the startup basically integrate into a larger solution and help provide the professional services to ensure the delivery success at any client.
And I think this is one of the key parts which I like to talk about, which is the superpowers of a corporate VC. as a GSI, you have the opportunity to have starters who are not yet credible and bring a huge amount of credibility and guidance. Can you talk a little bit about this? And then we will go back to the three knobs.
Correct. No, so I was actually really going to talk about that particularly. Okay. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to bring out this notion of open innovation and the partnership with the startups post-investment or even without an investment.
Yeah.
So as part of the open innovation function, what we do with the startups is we work collaboratively with the startups as they're looking to scale. So the types of startups that we work with are startups who are not looking for their first lighthouse client win because they're still working on their MVP. They don't necessarily have an MVP. A systems integrator is not going to be able to help a company, to be honest with you, and would not engage with the company that's working on their first MVP. Okay, what we're good at is helping a company that has their lighthouse win and helping them scale. Right? And in helping them scale these product management skill sets, again, help you with a discipline in scaling methodically, systematically, working with that startup, going, doing the rinse and repeat. Okay, we have a lighthouse win. We've got this client in this industry. We got this amazing lighthouse win. How can we help bring new clients to the table? How can we help lift the scale at which we can deploy? Those are the types of strengths where GSIs particularly are helpful. And from my perspective, I see time spent in product management helping me today on a day-to-day basis, working with the startups that I work with.
In a way, it would be very strange for a GSI company not to have this type of open innovation and corporate VC, because you're at the edge of the innovations coming from the startup ecosystem. Is there any reasons why you think a GSI company would not have a CVC?
Well, I think it would not benefit them not having a and I'll tell you why. Increasingly, clients are working with startups.
Exactly.
Gone are the days where clients are very risk averse and not willing to work with the startup. Yes, they want success in delivery, and that's where the GSI comes into place, because the GSI can bring the scale to ensure success. But it's not to mitigate risk anymore. It is to help with the delivery. The clients are working with startups today, period. Now, you can either join that or you can miss out. And ergo, a GSI that does not have an open innovation function or does not work with the startup community is increasingly missing a seat at the table, I would say.
I'm going to be cheeky, but you know the famous sentence, you can't be fired for choosing IBM? Now it's you can't be fired for choosing IBM and the startups they work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very nice. Now, I also want to talk about, in your background, you have also worked number 2 of the CVC of Accenture. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about what are the things you learned, the best practices, but also the things you wished you had in terms of what we have today, in terms of guidance and coaching and ecosystem?
Yes. So a lot of that has to do with both being in many instances, being starting a CVC program from scratch. And that's really what you're referring to, regardless of which company you're in.
Yep.
There is a learning curve and, starting a program from scratch.
Yep.
Now, today's companies that are starting their program from scratch have so many tools available to them than frankly speaking, I had when I went to this program. Right? Yeah. Because when I went into this program, I used to go to the global corporate venturing events, but the the training that they provide today was not available. And basically, the basics of learning how to do deal flow or learning how to negotiate term sheets and valuations, it was a daunting task trying to understand this. And
everything is new, right?
Everything was new, and there was nothing written down on anywhere. And so each year I would go, and I had another burning problem that I needed to solve, and I would talk to a number of folks. And one of the beauties of this community is our collaboration, to be honest, and our willingness to help each other out, and that frank and honest collaboration really helped that learning curve. Today, what we as a community have been able to do is channel those informal conversations into some more methodical training that can be provided. And I think that's a huge benefit to those newcomers into the organization, as well as those parent companies who are trying to start their programs from the ground up.
And I think we should give huge kudos to the GCV, Global Corporate Venturing Group. I had Jim, the founder, on the CVC Insider series earlier. I had Liz, who's leading the GCV Institute, also on the CVC Insider podcast. And what they are doing today is even more structured and more structured over time. So I think any new CVCs or people thinking about creating a CVC, do check GCV and do check the GCV Institute. And I was more lucky than you because I started January 2019 for the first Monterey event of GCV. You started in 2015. So I had a 4 years advantage where there was already much more structure.
Yeah.
But you add 4 more years because now the next one is 2023. You have so much more writings, articles, the GCV Institute classes. I mean, this is to the point where there's no more excuse for a new CVC not to know all the best practices.
I hope James Mawson is watching this and taking note, because I think he owes both of us for that amazing plug. But the plug
is watching. He's watching.
No, I'm just teasing. But the amazing plug is, it's not a plug. This is truly, a great forum for learning, especially for folks like me who came into this brand new, and with parent organizations who are also starting the organization brand new, and so that it's been very, very useful from that perspective.
Very nice. Now I want to go back a bit on the 3 knobs, and one of the knobs you mentioned is acquisition.
Yes.
So tell us about when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, but also when it makes sense to be explicit about it.
Okay, so I moved my head for a second because I was kind of thinking about explicit about it, and I was not quite understanding where you were going with that. So you might have to help me a little bit with that.
So what I mean is, when you engage with entrepreneurs, I always believe you need to be very transparent with them and tell them if an acquisition is never going to be in the cards, or actually it might be, or it's actually maybe the intent of the investment in the first place.
Yeah. So the way I look at it, I mean, there are many different philosophies in terms of acquisition and at equity investments and partnerships, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And it boils down to your thesis, right? And each company has their own opinion in terms of thesis, right? Do we acquire outright? Do we invest to acquire? Do we absolutely not invest if we're going to acquire? Do we partner first and learn about the company before we venture into any of the other two? You pardon my use of the word venture, but do we dip our toes by working with the startup first, or do we take an equity stake, or do we go ahead and acquire them outright? And the different businesses and the different business conditions will warrant a different strategy with every single potential startup. Okay, so there's no one right answer here. There's no one right journey over here. I think what is important is taking the time to know the company well when one does an acquisition, because acquisitions are expensive. Point blank. And merging an acquired company, two companies with two different cultures, and coming out of that equation with a success requires a lot of work. I think you'll agree with me.
Yep.
It is for that reason, the expense, the risk, the everything, and yet the value that an acquisition brings in terms of taking a company into adjacencies that they wouldn't be able to go into otherwise. Why acquisitions are such an important part of that equation. However, having said that, anything one can do to learn about the company, preferably through actually working with them in the field jointly together, that's the best way to know a company.
So much more. It's like perfect information in a way.
Exactly. That will mitigate so much of that risk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And even if you never acquire a company, that partnership, you don't have to acquire, you can partner, and that partnership will enable you to achieve your business objectives almost as effectively. And that's why it's so important to have these three knobs. And what I'm saying is also true, frankly speaking, of investing. You don't have to invest, you can partner. Investing will help you hockey stick your relationship, right? But it doesn't have to be. And you can partner with a lot more companies than investing. So my recommendation to every company is to embrace these tools of innovation to the fullest and leverage them to the fullest based on the specific need.
Actually, if I look at TDK Ventures, we've partnered with more startups we don't invest with than we have partnered with our portfolio companies, because at the end we invest in one company, we probably don't invest in more than 100.
Yes.
But in these 100, for other reasons we don't invest, are very good reasons to partner with.
Absolutely. So the deal flow goes in all directions. Yep. It goes, those that you don't acquire or invest in being deal flows for partnerships that you're already working being deal flows for equity and acquisition, and having those lines open so that you can work with the startup based on the need is hugely important. And then, of course, being frank and open and honest about where you are in your business relationships. For me, I live and eat and breathe by that, because the credibility that you get from that honesty pays off in spades. And so being honest with the startup in terms of why you're at the table and what you're in it for and what you can commit to today, and yet showing them the promise of what can happen in the future through that relationship, whatever that may be, in a authentic and honest manner, that's where you get the credibility.
It makes total sense. Now, you talked about these three knobs. How do you actually, maybe the first question is, in terms of investment, you do want to partner with these startups, and sometimes you decide to invest, sometimes you decide not to invest. What is the driving force between investing and not investing for the startups you do want to partner anyway?
Yeah. So again, this is my personal approach, and I'll share with you what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
My inclination is partnership, and partnership first. Okay. Now, the way I look at it is partnership is a deal flow to equity investing. And in working with a partner, what happens is that, yeah, you're making progress, you're making good progress, and you can continue making good progress. But you can unlock some potential that you're not able to unlock today through an equity investment. Mm. And that potential is a rapid scale at which we are capable of seizing market share by signaling to the industry that we are working tightly together. And that business case is what drives a decision of whether to just continue down a partnering path or whether to put in. And let's be honest, CVCs, when we do this type of partnering, we're not breaking the bank for the startup. We're not a big source of income. We are a strategic. And so for a small investment, a small strategic investment, we are able to unlock the potential of, market share grab.
Yep.
In exchange
arguably is giving you information about which startup could do very, very well. So it does make sense to actually invest in them, right?
Right. Exactly.
Very, very nice.
That's how I look at it, and that's what I go looking for from the toolkit of all of the potential investments being the partnership community. And like you, Nicolas, at IBM, we've got a large set of partners that we work with.
Very nice. Now I want to talk about recruitment in a corporate VC. What are the best practices you've seen in terms of building the team and recruiting carefully?
Yeah. So from a recruitment perspective, look, every individual has their strengths. And I am huge on teamwork. And it's very important for me that I work in a team environment. And like with any team environment, each individual on the team is going to come to the table with different skills. And it's a case of building teams where the skills complement each other.
Yep.
And in developing a investment team, or in developing a business development team, it holds for any teams. But let's talk about equity investment teams.
Okay.
We have to have multiple disciplines at the table. That's the reality of it. You've got to have your legal counsel at the table, for example. You've got to have your number crunchers at the table, for example. You have to have folks who understand business development and understand the startups and can do the deal flow, for example. And so it's important when you are evaluating a candidate, understanding what's missing from your current team and what skills are you looking for. And then how can that candidate either help you fill that need immediately, and then over time, where that candidate can grow and evolve, because every one of us is on a journey in order to be able to develop skills in-house that will enable them to grow and expand. I mean, I'm a case in point. I had, an understanding of the startup community. I had from my research work, I had a lot of technical expertise. But who would have thought that I would be in a position where I would be able to go in and out of term sheets? Okay,
someone did.
Someone did, and they gave me that chance. And lo and behold, here we are today. So we have to think about candidates both in terms of what they can offer today and where we can help them grow in the future. I think that's very important. But I'm answering it. I mean, that this is basics in any team. It applies as much to equity investment as it does to any aspect of the business.
So I would argue that for investment, where you have imperfect information, decision making matters greatly. And you have superior decision making when you have diversity of thoughts and complementary skills. Yes. So I would argue that in a corporate VC where we invest and allocate resources and partner, that diversity of thoughts is critical.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about investment decisions. How are you structured? How is your investment committee thinking about things? How do you make sure you're fast at the same time as very thoughtful?
Yeah. So, really, I think it's very, very important. Both aspects of it are such important aspects. So you have brought up a very important point over here, because as strategic VCs, as I always say, we are always the last to the table because we have a small equity investment to make, and we typically don't lead investments. We have to be very nimble. We have to be able to make decisions fast because we will miss out on rounds, and we cannot expect the lead investor or the CEO of a startup to hold rounds open indefinitely for us. I mean, that's just not practical.
Yep.
And so in forming that approach to decision making within an organization, it is very important to ensure that the process is set up for very, very efficient decision making in terms of equity investment, right? At the same time, there's this aspect of speed to decision is great, but you cannot have speed and compromise the thoughtfulness aspect of it.
Yeah, you can speed, but don't rush.
You have to develop your own conviction, using the term that I referred earlier. You have to allow yourself the time to develop the conviction before you go off and speedily make an investment, because without the conviction, post investment, you're going to struggle.
So here, first, it's a golden nugget, but I want to double click. How do you build conviction? And you mentioned earlier you're thesis driven. How do you build a thesis?
Yeah. So, I think thesis driven depends on the type of company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
that's what I'm asking for you.
Yes. So for me, the thesis driven is very, very simple. Okay. What IBM Consulting, looks for is those companies that are not trying to figure their MVP out, because we're not going to be able to help them, to be frank with you. We are going to be able to help those companies who have their MVP, who have validated their MVP with a few clients. Those clients are intersecting with IBM's client base, and the startup is now at a point where they're saying, I'm running out of steam. I can either build a really, really, really large organization in order to scale, or I can partner. And a company like IBM Consulting can come in and be that route to market from a partnering perspective for that company. So what that translates into is Series B being the sweet spot, but somewhere between Series A and Series C, by exception Series D, but usually by Series D they've got it figured out. So somewhere between Series A and C, certainly not at the seed round level, right? The second thing is, as a GSI, selfishly, of course, we're going to look at companies that are, need professional services to integrate into a solution that is meaningful for the client, because that's where we make our bread and butter, right? And so obviously we're going to look at, startups, Series B startups, but if the Series B startup needs to scale by, increasing their hardware capabilities, well, that's perhaps not a good fit, right? Mm-hmm. It's professional services that we're looking at over here, right? And so that's unique to IBM Consulting. Also, I see a lot of technology companies investing very early because they have a front row seat to innovation, right? And IBM is an interesting company because we've got both the technology and the services all wrapped up in one company. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at companies, we look at companies that sometimes and very often benefit both sides of the organization. And so having that lead indicator of innovation direction is a critical component of an evaluation of whether to make an equity investment in a company or not.
Actually, I can see definitively the case of augmenting what's already there. Would you also consider investing in a startup that could disrupt part of IBM?
I would have to defer to IBM Technologies for that, because that is squarely in the space of IBM Technologies. But and I work in the consulting side of the equation, so that is a question for IBM Ventures. I would be remiss in answering that question. But at the general level, if we don't, what they say is, what's the term? And I'm just speaking generally, right? Keep your friends close and keep your enemies closer.
I see.
Right? If you're not looking for potential disruptions and keeping an eye on potential disruptions and figuring out how you're going to deal with the disruptions, you're not going to be doing yourself a service as a company. The question then becomes, how do you keep an eye on disruptions? And there's no one safe answer to that. There are, again, lots of different tools that you can use.
Yep.
And making an equity investment is just one of the tools.
It's one of the tools, and it's all about addressing blind spots.
Yes, exactly.
Which actually goes back to my question about the investment committee. So who is in your investment committee? Do they need to all approve, or only some of them? How does that work, so that maybe the audience gets a sense of best practices that you've developed?
Yeah, so from an IBM consulting perspective, essentially what we do is we have our key leaders, and we make sure that our key leaders from the market, as well as from the head of IBM Consulting, as well as the service line leader who's bringing forward that equity investment, are all aligned, because it's very important to have everyone aligned. That thoughtfulness that we were talking about earlier, that alignment, without that alignment before you make an equity investment, will hurt you post investment. And what we're looking to do is post investment, because we're a GSI, we want to go fast, right? We want to be selling fast. And so we need to put a lot of constructs in place ahead of that equity investment to enable us to sell fast. And so, that any amount of time that is taken, even if it means not making that equity investment because you miss out on the opportunity, having that alignment and taking the time to have that alignment is hugely important, right? Because even if we miss that equity investment, it's not the end of the world. We can partner. We were a partner before, we're a partner after. So,
and also, I mean, you may decide the alignment is not that strong as a Series B, and then you ensure the alignment becomes very strong, and Series C, you could still invest.
Exactly. Exactly, because we're looking at the business. We're looking at, the large amount of money you can get from the business.
I think it's a golden nugget in that all the work of ensuring this alignment maximize the chance for a very good on-ramp of the startups with the rest of the groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any best practice on how to ensure that alignment is done well? Because we don't talk about it a lot. We talk about at high level the alignment, but there's a lot of work to be done to make sure the alignment is strong. Any best practices or tips?
Yeah, so having a good handle on the potential market and being able to plan a reasonable expansion of the business over time, because this is a new practice. You're building a new practice with this company in many cases, and new practice development is not easy. So having what I find is that very often we will build a business case, and if that business case is not well aligned with the roadmap of how the company is going to evolve, you won't make the business case. So the business case has to be grounded in reality, has to be conservative to a certain extent, and yet show the potential of that market. The upside. So that is a very careful dance, and making sure that, startups, how often have we had startups that were really, really good startups, but they mistimed, right? So that conservative approach to what you're really going to be able to generate from a revenue perspective is really important.
And that's also maybe where Series B is your sweet spot, because at that point you can actually have a good grasp on the business case. Well, if it's Series A, there's still quite a few unknowns and they haven't proven their market fit and so on. So how do you approach a Series A versus a Series B in this case?
Yeah. So it's really, why is Series B a sweet spot, and when would you consider Series A?
Yep.
When you've got brand spanking new technologies, and I'll give you a case in point. I dipped my toes into blockchain for the first time 7 years ago.
All right.
Okay.
Which is about the time of the white paper.
Exactly. Yep. You got it.
Yep. I read it too. That was impressive.
How are you going to, even if you say Series B is my sweet spot, there ain't no company in the world that is at the Series B stage. And yet, that this technology area is hugely an important technology area. Fast forward, okay? Quantum computing is another example, all right? Hugely important area.
Yep.
But where are we in terms of the availability of companies in the industry in quantum computing? You're going to have to take some risk, right? And that's when you start dipping your toes, because even if that investment is not successful, it's not about the success of that specific company. It's what you learn in the process that will help you play in the game and inform your subsequent investments. And so that's when you go early, when it's not, it's not clear yet.
Yeah.
And having a portfolio approach helps.
It does, especially when it's such technologies like blockchain or quantum computing, where you're trying to discover use cases that has an end-to-end delivery. And that may take a long time. And sometimes I think what you're explaining is you're going to learn what you don't know. And you're learning about the gaps.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you share back all these learnings back to the organizations? Do you have some type of reports, newsletter? How do you make sure that all these insights you gain as a corporate VC become actionable inside the mothership?
Yeah, so, for me, that part of every corporate VC that is called portfolio management. Everyone has it, right? That part of portfolio management, in the case of an organization like a GSI, is actually the organization that's doing the business development. So what I found was that, when I was working with co-investing with some companies, right? A lot of the companies that I would co-invest with would work very closely with me, because they found me working day to day with the startups in helping them grow. So it wasn't just, fire and sit back and watch the equity investment. It's being in the trenches and helping those startups do what it is that they need to do. That learning from working with the startups and mediating between what that learning is and the organization that sponsored the equity investment, and helping them learn from and evolve and grow their business plans on a quarterly basis as they adjust. on a regular basis is how we kind of share that. So, my team works with the business owners in the field, in the market, and works with the startups and basically helps bring those two together on a regular basis to adjust to the ebbs and flows of the business and to learn and then evolve their next version of the business plan based on their learning.
Very nice. When you say portfolio management, you mean you don't mean the portfolio just of the startups you invest, but also the one you decide not to invest but partner.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay. we do that across the board through all of our portfolio of companies that we work with.
So I will double click here on the skill sets of that portfolio team, because this is so critical a team. And whether you think it should be internal recruitment, external, or some kind of hybrid.
Yeah, I think for that team, I'm less concerned about internal or external, because revolving doors do change. It's having the domain expertise to really be able to help the partner.
I agree. Otherwise, you can't find a win-win.
Yes, you have to, having the domain expertise, and that's not easy. Believe me, as I say that, it's not easy when you're dealing with the breadth and depth of companies that we're dealing with. But I think over time, having that team build their domain expertise and have their business development, in my case, I value the business development skills a lot, because what we're doing is we're helping with the pipeline.
Very nice. Now we're getting to the end of the interview, and I want to ask a question about what would Pramila today tell Pramila in 2015? Maybe 2 or 3 advice you would give yourself if you could have known everything you know today back in 2015.
I'll be honest with you, as and I'm reaching out to the women over here, and I will be honest with you. I stepped into this, and I was very, very ginger about it, because I had the whole list of things that I did not know. And, I think women have a tendency to want to be able to know everything and be 95% confident that they can do the job before they'll jump in and do the job. Mm-hmm. Right. And the journey that I've been on in the last 7 years is a journey that recognized that, A, you don't have to have all the answers, and B, nobody has all the answers, and you develop, and it is in fact a journey, and you're going to learn and you're going to evolve. So what I would have told my 2015 self is, I know you were struggling on valuations. Don't worry about struggling because you didn't know how to evaluate, how to set a valuation on a company, because guess what? There's no science to that. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and you will learn from experience. So don't be afraid to jump in, because you will grow and you will learn from experience. And that is my and I'm particularly talking about the women, because we do have a shortage of women in the CVC community, and I'm reaching out to encourage others to jump in and not be afraid, because they will learn and grow in the process, and they don't have to come to the table knowing it all.
Very, very nice. I will speak for myself, and I think I wrote about it. When I started, I assumed that I knew nothing. And I think that really helps. So I'm hoping this podcast is helpful also for people who don't know, to realize that many people actually don't know everything. Yes. And there are many, many different answers to the same question.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I also want to give a chance to the entrepreneurs who are listening to this podcast. What are you looking at investing next? The next 12 to 18 months, what are you excited about?
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at IBM Ventures is definitely looking at 4 key technology areas, and I kind of hinted about it earlier when I spoke. Quantum computing is huge, security, AI, and sustainability is such a big topic. In fact, I joined the sustainability session at the last Global Corporate Venturing for that very reason.
Nice.
So those are 4 key technology areas. But the reality is that IBM Consulting spans the gamut, and so we have technology needs in so many different industries, from from fintech to energy utilities, to TME, healthcare, and there's innovation and there's disruption occurring in each one of these industries, and we need to keep an eye on that continuous improvement and enhancement in each of these industries in order to be relevant for our clients. And so we, from a partnership perspective, we have our eyes on all of these. Also, we're a big partner from a talent transformation perspective, or from a supply chain perspective, from the hybrid cloud journey that our clients are on, and helping our clients with the hybrid cloud journey. And so we take a look at it from a very, very wide spectrum, and that creates both an opportunity as well as a challenge, frankly speaking, because it's not easy with limited resources to have that domain expertise, and that's when we have to think of creative ways to fill in the gaps in terms of domain expertise, because we're dealing with such a wide gamut.
And it's actually even cross-domain expertise, because quantum computing, AI, security, I mean, you do have a requirement to understand multiple domains and not just one domain expertise.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to very quickly double-click on sustainability. What type of entrepreneurs or project are you looking at to invest in sustainability?
We don't have, I don't have, it's very early stage. Sustainability is one of those, like if I think about blockchain, for example, right? Back when we were in 2015, sustainability is one of those early stage ones. I mean, we've talked about sustainability in the past, but really what we're talking about today in terms of ESG and risk analytics and things such as that, we're still at the early stage in terms of forming our investment thesis, as well as early stages in terms of companies even who are working in this space. So it's brand spanking new, and we're going to have to go through that journey together, and we will learn more as we go along, whether we are successful in the investments or whether we're not.
Yeah, I think on sustainability and blockchain, clearly moving away from proof of work to proof of stake, that is already critical improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very nice. And then my last question is, what would be your advice to someone thinking about starting a CVC in their company when they don't already have a CVC?
Yeah. So, it's really important. As I look at the successes, right? There's two types of skill sets that are hugely important. One type of skill set is internally facing, and that is having a good handle of the business and having someone leading up that CVC unit that has a good handle of the company, the business, and the network that enable them to develop that that CVC. And the second aspect of it has to do with leading the way in terms of creating that CVC organization and building the team of multiple skill sets that you've got. Now, again, you will not always have, as you're filling out this organization to help guide you, you will not always have those skill sets necessarily found in any one individual. right? And so you will have to develop that through a number of individuals, but forming the right team, making sure that you've got, legal counsel, whether it's internal legal counsel or whether it's external legal counsel, because there are ways of bringing that expertise in, and just systematically thinking through what that structure is required, and then filling that structure is going to be hugely important.
Very nice. I think you finished with a really nice golden nugget. So I want to thank you, Pramila, for all your time today and your insights and your tips. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.